Hey there! Did you know Kroger always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower-than-low prices? And when you download the Kroger app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Kroger today. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
Hello, producer guy here. Just a warning ahead of this podcast. It looks like Tadee didn't plug in his mic properly, or he didn't switch to it on Zoom or Skype, whichever he recorded through this week. So his audio is a bit mobile phone-ish. That's the words I'll go with there. So it's not the best sound quality, and I can only apologise for that. I thought I might as well release the podcast just with a little warning ahead of it. So if the sound quality is a bit below our usual standards, I can only apologise. Hopefully you do still enjoy the show. And if you can't make it through, we do understand. But apologies ahead of that. But I thought I'd come in with a little warning. But please do enjoy the show if you can. Thank you for listening.
Salah. Escape Cancelo. Oh, it's brilliant from Mo Salah. And still, Salah. Oh, sensational! Son had a goal and scored a beauty.
Oh, what a strike from Yuri Tielemans.
De Bruyne. That is what Martinelli, gorgeous. Still going up. Oh, he's done it again.
And City have won the Premier League. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, EPL Index proudly brings to you the best prediction podcast in the world, A Tad Predictable, with your host, Tariwa Chanakira, and his guest, Man United fan Mo.
It's GameWeek 32, and you know what that means. It's time for another brand new episode of A Tad Predictable. The games are coming thick and fast. We've had midweek action, and we're obviously going to have action this weekend in the Premier League. And rightfully so, the title of this podcast is Full Speed Ahead, because we don't stop in the Premier League at the moment. It's all about trying to finish as high as you can. There are teams in the relegation zone that are hoping to get out of there, teams that are fighting for European spots, teams that are fighting to be, at the top of the Premier League. There are 3 teams specifically at the moment. And then obviously everyone else is just trying to finish as high as they possibly can. There are financial implications with how high you finish in the Premier League. But I am joined by Man United fan Mo to discuss this coming weekend's game. And there's obviously a massive Man United-Liverpool game coming up that we'll talk about later on in the show. But Mo, welcome back onto the show.
Thank you, Dad. It's great to be back here, and especially given the period that we're going through at this moment, the title run-in and, the Champions League places up for grabs, maybe one more this season. So really excited looking forward to the action.
Yeah, it's been a fun, it's been a competitive Premier League season. It depends whether it was fun by who you support, I guess, and what expectations you had for your team. But the good thing from, I guess, a neutral perspective is everything is still up for grabs. There's still teams that are fighting to stay out of the relegation zone, teams that are fighting to get out of the relegation zone itself. There are a lot of teams fighting to get into those European spots. You've mentioned that 5th spot looks like it could be opened up to the Premier League. So there's competition there. And then obviously it's not just a 2-horse race, but a 3-horse race for the title. So anywhere you look on the league table, there's stuff for all kinds of drama.
Absolutely. We have had a couple of closely contested titles in the last few years as well. But what makes this one even better is it's not 2 teams, it's 3 teams fighting for it. So absolutely that is something that is new in the last few years. And I think the only thing that's sort of like, predictable at this moment is maybe the 2 teams that are probably going down at the bottom of the table. But other than that, like you said, everything is probably up for grabs. Teams fighting to stay out of the relegation zone, teams fighting to keep their points alive as well.
Yeah, definitely an exciting season from that perspective. Let's jump into the fixtures for this weekend. But before we do, just some housekeeping, obviously, to peel back the curtain. We're recording this prior to Thursday night game. So that's obviously Liverpool versus Sheffield United and Chelsea versus Man United. But we've been able to watch and analyze all the rest of the other games that happened this midweek. And I think that will really affect near the end of the podcast. Because all four of those teams are involved in games on Sunday. So we'll obviously get to those towards the end of the podcast. But let's jump in with a team that had a very impressive performance last night. Man City, they traveled to Crystal Palace. From Palace perspective, I think obviously they had that 1-0 loss to Bournemouth where they themselves, Crystal Palace, had the ball in the back of the net. So maybe they'll feel a bit unlucky that was slightly offside there, but hey, offside is offside. And then from Man City's perspective, it basically was a Phil Foden showcase match where he went and got his hat-trick. They go and emphatically beat Man City. But, I mean, they emphatically go and beat Aston Villa. But what do you make of this Crystal Palace versus Man City game?
I think it's one of those games that on paper the people would know what the result is because irrespective of the position that Man City are in, they are probably favorites for a lot of people still to win the title. So when it comes to talking about the result, I think that's probably slightly a given, but Crystal Palace have done well, especially in the recent game, even though the result didn't go their way. So I think it'll be a closely contested game, but with Man City eventually turning out to the winners.
Yeah, and it seems like, and I think on TNT Sport last night, the commentator mentioned it, I think it was Ali, but every time you watch either Man City, Arsenal, or Liverpool, it almost feels like, oh, that team's the one that's going to win it. And then you see the other team play, and then there's reasons for that team to go and win it. And obviously, maybe this is a sore subject for you, being a Man United fan, and I'm sure you'd want to be in that conversation. But all of those teams that are in this conversation went, years ago. So maybe this is their time, and Man United will come back at them and could have a say in the title race, as we'll discuss later on. But from my perspective, I think in the past, Crystal Palace have sometimes been kind of a bogey team for Man City. We've seen some crazy results in those games, and Andy Townsend's goal sort of rings in the memory quite clearly, but I think that's going to be the case this time around. City rested quite a lot of their big losses as well, so they'll be fresh and ready to go and play in that game. And then obviously they've got weak action to worry about in the Champions League, but I still think I think I go purely because I do wonder if they might put, knowing they've got that massive chance.
You're slightly cutting a little bit, but I think I got the gist of what you're saying. So, yeah, Crystal Palace have surprised Man City of late a couple of times. Like you mentioned, you actually just caught the words right out of my mouth when you mentioned Townsend. That's exactly what I was thinking. But given the momentum that City are getting, and especially given the win that they got last night, it's a huge momentum booster for them, and I think they will probably get the job done.
Yeah, what score prediction would you go for that one?
I'm going to go with a boring one, and I'm going to go 2-0 City.
Okay, 2-0 to City there. All right, we're in unison there. We both got 2-0 for them there. We'll see what they do in the Champions League as well. Massive game against Real Madrid midweek on Tuesday night. Let's move on to the team that City sort of just brushed to the side last night, Aston Villa. They will obviously be entertaining Brentford on Saturday. Now, for Aston Villa, they have quite a depleted squad, which is probably the last place you want to go in the Premier League is the Etihad when you've got a depleted squad. But my thing is, on paper, that City result looks a lot more impressive because it's an Aston Villa side that sits in that top 5 spot. Obviously, they're trying to maybe push up to the fourth one. The Premier League don't get that fifth, but it seems likely that Premier League will get it. But so Aston Villa are in the perfect position right now. They're in that fourth spot, but Spurs have a game in hand on them and could jump them. Is it a case of trying to see which players they can get fit in time for this Brentford game? And then obviously from a Brentford perspective, they had that pretty much a very tactical game against Brighton, which ended up being a draw, kind of hovering still near that relegation zone, sitting on 28 points, maybe a win or two, and they're safe based on the points tally of the likes of Luton, who are on 22 points. But how do you see them positioning themselves in this game?
I think Brentford have been pretty good on the pitch. Some of the results that might have not gone their way, but they really actually put a game. Especially being a Manchester United fan, I remember before the game against Brighton, they really actually go for it. And given how Aston Villa play, I think this might be an exciting game. We might see a few goals, and like you mentioned, I probably feel Brentford fans feel comfortable with their position, that they will be staying up. They need maybe 5 or 6 points to cement that, and eventually I feel they'll be able to get that even if it's not today against Aston Villa. And Aston Villa were playing against City, so we are focusing on the Foden masterclass, but we do have to remember that Unai Emery has actually done a brilliant job. Their season at this moment reminds me a little bit of Newcastle's last year, when they were at the end of the season slightly struggling to hold on, and eventually they did hold on. Unfortunately for Villa, I feel like they might not be able to hold on to the fourth position. Maybe fifth will be good enough for them. Who knows? The injuries are certainly not helping, and I think I believe we are in for an interesting game when it comes to Aston Villa versus Brentford.
Yeah, definitely one maybe to look out for this weekend. Let's move on to Everton versus Burnley, one of those proverbial 6-pointers. We know where these teams sit in the table, and if you're not too familiar with the finer details of it, you have Burnley sitting in 19th place with 19 points, Everton sitting in 16th place with 26 points. Everton having played one less game than majority of the teams in and around them in that relegation zone. So I think that there's an opportunity, if I'm Burnley, to try and claw Everton back into that conversation of the relegation zone. It would leave them 1 point, or it would leave them 4 points behind Everton. So if anything, if there ever is must-win games, it's starting to get to the point of the season where almost every game is a must-win. But if I'm Burnley, I want that relegation battle as possible, because obviously it increases my odds of staying up. But what do you make of Everton? Obviously, they had that 1-1 draw against Newcastle last time out. And then also from a Burnley perspective, I think Burnley have looked quite impressive recently. Results haven't all gone their way necessarily, but even in those draws, a draw against Chelsea when Burnley had 10 men, that draw against Wolves, in a game where both teams looked like they could have gone and won that game, they're making their games competitive all of a sudden against an Everton side who, I guess from their perspective, BCL scoring hopefully is huge for them from a confidence perspective.
Yeah, I agree. Especially on the fact that you mentioned that recently they've been actually playing some great games. Burnley actually is one of the teams that I do feel like are probably heading down. However, like you mentioned, in the last few games, I think they're undefeated in the last four. I know there aren't many wins, but some of the draws that they've gotten, they've been pretty good. So it looks like they're gonna go down. If they're gonna go down, they're gonna go down swinging, and they would love to stretch Everton into a relegation battle as well. But from the Everton's perspective, I think they've kind of got this under control. They they just need a couple of wins to make sure that they're completely out of this battle. And if they win tomorrow, I think that would probably guarantee their safety. Given, like you mentioned, that it's a proverbial 6 pointer as well.
Yeah, massive emphasis on not necessarily needing to get to that magical 40-point mark this season, considering some of the points tallies of the teams in and around that relegation zone. So yeah, I think mid-30s is probably where you'd cut it off and say you're likely to be fine. And looking at some of the fixtures that teams have to play later on, but I'll check with you with regards to your Everton versus Burnley score, and then if we can hop back to Aston Villa versus Brentford. I've got a guy in my ear screaming that we didn't give our predictions for Aston Villa versus Brentford. But so let's get Aston Villa versus Brentford first for your score prediction, and then your score prediction for Everton versus Burnley.
I've got the same prediction for both of these. I'm gonna go with the draw in both of these games. 2-2 for Aston Villa and Brentford, and 1-1 for Everton Burnley.
I don't think either team will be happy with that Everton result, Everton Burnley result. It just both of them need the win there, and as you say, for Burnley, they've had some decent performances, but not all of them are ending up in wins, which makes it quite excruciating at this point of the season, where you do need to start clawing away some wins in order to climb up that table. From my perspective, I think Aston Villa versus Brentford, I guess all rests on whether or not Ollie Watkins can tape himself together and be ready for this game. Obviously, if you're looking at the injury reports, they're saying it's more likely, a small injury, and they're hoping to have him back for this weekend. So if he can be back for this weekend, that would be great for them, despite the fact that they did relatively okay for the first half without him. I do think they are missing him. Obviously, we know the likes of John McGinn, who was sent off for that straight red card. Him coming back will be huge for them. Emi Martinez had that virus, which kept him out of this game. Hopefully, he's back for this game. So they've got some players starting to come back, which I think will help them out in this game. I've gone 1-0 to Aston Villa. I think it's going to be a tight game. Brentford, my issue with Brentford is I'm struggling to give them a win until I see them win a game. I would rather be a week behind in predicting a win for them than a week too early. And at the moment, they just can't seem to buy a win. So yeah, I've gone 1-0 there. For Everton versus Burnley, Everton just seem really, really unlucky at the moment. I don't know what it is. Defensively, they look solid enough. They can't seem to put the ball in the back of the net. It's been sort of the course of action for most of the season. I'm sure they'll be praying and hoping that DCL getting that penalty goal gives them the confidence to go and start banging in a couple of goals. We saw, for example, Richarlison early in the season where he couldn't seem to score, and then all of a sudden he started scoring in great batches. I think that the problem for Everton is with the Richarlison case, and maybe it's too soon to be talking about Richarlison and Everton, but with the Richarlison case, he was getting chances and missing chances. So he was getting into good position. That's what made me confident he was going to start scoring soon. I've not necessarily seen that from DCL this season. It seems a bit sluggish for them from that perspective. But hey, if I'm Dyche, I'm leaning on the fact that you've scored, mate. Use that as a boost to try and get goals. I'm going to go 2-1 to Burnley in this one. I think Burnley make the relegation zone even more interesting by clawing Everton somewhat closer to them. And that's purely because of the confidence that these two are going into it. I just think Burnley are going to go into it a lot more confident.
Yeah, and that's a massive result as well, not only for Burnley, for a lot of the teams down there, and would definitely make the last few weeks quite interesting.
Definitely the case. Yeah. Let's move on to Fulham versus Newcastle. I mean, look, for Fulham, they've had decent football in the recent couple of weeks, and then they come up against a Nottingham Forest side, who I do believe can put in the type of performance that they have this season with the talented players that they have. they've just not been able to put it together for enough games this season to be clear of the relegation zone. But from a Fulham perspective, probably disappointing. Being put away maybe so easily, if I can say, by Nottingham Forest. They would have wanted to make that a tougher test for them, but nonetheless, they have to shake it off, move on. They're of course the team of ATP this season, the team that we've chosen to root for this season. We pick a new team each season, and we sort of root for them to do well. Fulham were the pick for us. They've been doing well recently, and it's been fun watching their game. Muniz has been a joy to watch up front. You've got likes of Iwobi, Paulinho, even Harry Wilson when he's coming on. They look lively, they look exciting in my opinion. Newcastle, who we mentioned Aston Villa with the amount of injuries they have, Newcastle are equally, if not worse off in terms of injuries at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, Fulham have obviously the last result didn't go their way, but the last few games, the win against Spurs and then the comeback against Sheffield, I believe, they have definitely looked lively, especially up front. And I think in the same vein, it could be said about Newcastle as well. And the last couple of games, they have looked quite threatening, and this is with a lot of injuries. Once again, I think it's a game that will be really interesting. Both teams will go into the game fencing themselves for a win, and they have had problems, Newcastle, in terms of closing out results and this season, but their recent form might help them, get one here.
Yeah, I think for me the problem with Newcastle is being able to control games. It seems like basketball matches end to end, your attack versus my, who goes and wins it. There's not many periods in a Newcastle game where they can sort of put their foot on the ball, pass it around midfield, and just sort of slow the tempo of the game down. They play at such a frightening pace. Everyone that comes and plays against them has to play in that way, and that almost leads to these high-scoring games from these Newcastle games. Fulham will obviously allow Newcastle a lot more of this and look to break on them in counter-attack. With the injuries for Newcastle, I don't see them keeping a clean sheet. De Bruyne is back there at the moment. I'm not so confident in him as a goalkeeper at this point in his career, and I think whilst having him in the team, much to my annoyance at the moment, but such is the case with football and fantasy. Sometimes you have to play a strategic game there. But yeah, I'm not confident in them getting a clean sheet. I am now swaying back and forth between a high-scoring draw or whether or not one of these two teams sort of pip it at the end. But what score prediction have you got?
I've got a high-scoring one, like you mentioned, and once again, it's the reason being that both of these teams they do play some very attractive football. They do have a few goals in them, so I'm gonna go with a 3-2 win for Newcastle.
I've gone the other way. I've gone with the home team. I've gone with the team of ATP. I have to back them because obviously they're the team for ATP. I want to see them do well. So I think it's also going to be a high-scoring 3-2 game, but I've gone 3-2 to Fulham. I just think Newcastle's makeshift back line might be in trouble. Obviously, with Fulham's runners, especially out wide, they've got runners coming from deep with the likes of Pereira. I think it might cause them a bit of issues, Newcastle. And that might be that. But let's move on to Luton versus Bournemouth. I think Luton had that tough task of going to the Emirates. Obviously, Arsenal wanting to get back on top of the Premier League table, which they went and did. And then, obviously, from a Bournemouth perspective, we kind of spoke about them, maybe focus more on the Crystal Palace side when we spoke about Crystal Palace early on. But they had that 1-0 win. I don't think it was convincing against Crystal Palace in midweek. What do you make of Luton versus Bournemouth? And is Bournemouth one of those teams that you would consider to maybe try and push to get as high as they can in the table? They've obviously gone past that 40 mark, which we've said you probably don't need, but they're still at 41 points at the moment. What's left for them to do this season? And then obviously for Luton, it's again another must-win. They're sitting in that unfortunate 18th spot in the Premier League table.
Yeah, I don't think like Bournemouth and is in one of those positions where they're safe. Then they're not fighting for any European place. Kind of feels like they do not have anything to play for the rest of the season. But of course, that's not how it actually is. So one thing that I am sure about is convincing is not the word that can be used with Bournemouth. I don't think they've been convincing in the past few weeks, even though they have 4 wins out of 5 in the last 5, and their points tally is pretty good. But maybe that is something for them to look forward to for the rest of the season, to find some stability, to find their feet, for the players to get a chance to make a place in the next season. And when it comes to Luton, Luton have been that team in the Premier League that we get almost every year from the Championship. That they've been thoroughly entertaining. They are giving their best, and they want to make sure that they get a chance to stay in the Premier League, especially given the deductions that we have seen with a couple of teams. I think it's a very, very hard task for them to stay up, given the quality of the teams around them. And and the game that they're coming from, that's I don't think that's a game that they can take too much from. They were playing against one of the best in the league, top of the table actually. So I don't think they ever got a foothold in that game. Arsenal just blew them away in the first half, and the second half was just closing out the result. It's a difficult one to predict for me. Given the luck and given the results Bournemouth have had, I am willing to, or I am, inclined towards a Bournemouth result here. What have you got?
I've got 2-2 at the moment, because we know what Kenilworth Road is in terms of how Luton performed there at home in that tight pitch. I think Bournemouth do like to spread the ball out wide, with the likes of Semenyo and Clive out wide, and bringing it in, crosses for the likes of Dominic Solanke to get at the end of. I don't know if there's going to be as much space and the space that they usually like to operate in a game like this. So I wonder if they're going to be able to pull away enough. And as you mentioned, obviously from a confidence level on their performances, yes, they're getting the results, but not necessarily playing all that well. They're allowing teams to get ahead early, and then almost that's when Bournemouth wake up. It's almost like they have to get punched in the face before they wake up in the game. So I can see Luton getting that first goal, going 1-0 up, maybe Bournemouth getting the next 2 goals, and then Luton being the home team trying to go and look and hunt for that equalising goal late on, obviously with them knowing they need as many points as they can. That's kind of how I'm seeing the game going. So yeah, I've got 2-2 here.
All right, fair enough. And like you said, Luton will definitely be going for it. Draws do not do them any good. They need wins under their belt if they have to give themselves a chance. And I think that's where they might be slightly vulnerable, and Bournemouth might be able to just get a result. So I'm gonna go with Bournemouth 2-1.
2-1 to Bournemouth there. And obviously this is one, if I'm not mistaken, 5 games that are at 3 o'clock here in the UK, so they're not going to be televised. But if you guys want to make sure you're going to catch that game and a whole lot of other things that you can do, definitely link up with our presenting sponsors, Liberty Shield. This podcast is presented by EPL Index in association with Liberty Shield. If you guys use the coupon code EPL25, you'll get 25% off of the router or the software VPN. The software VPN downloads straight onto your devices. Guys, Liberty Shield is a great VPN service. It's easy to use, really easy to install, and has a whole host of features. It can be installed on multiple devices, as I have it. on multiple or all of my devices actually. Whether you're traveling and you don't want to get locked out of your bank account, or you want to be safe whilst using public Wi-Fi, if you want to unlock geolock content, or you just want to protect your online data, it's so vital that you link up with Liberty Shield. It's one of my favorite things because I'm a huge fan of American sports. And not all American sports are shown in the UK, but with Liberty Shield, I'm able to navigate that so easily. I can watch all of the sport that I love to watch to my heart's content. Obviously, March Madness, both the men's and the women's tournament at the moment in the US. College basketball is really, really hot. The women's tournament probably more exciting than the men's one at the moment. But my Yukon Huskies team is still in the tournament for the men's side, which is obviously important. From my perspective and my viewing pleasure, and they obviously won the tournament last year. Guys, go and check out Liberty Shield. As I said, there is that coupon code. We are going to allow Mo some time to gather his thoughts. It's his first, if I'm not mistaken, Mo, your first bank it or burn it of the season. Yeah. So let's go to a quick ad break, let you guys do your thoughts, and we'll be right back with Bank It or Burn It for Mo. All right, we are back. Mo, Bank It or Burn It, how are you feeling?
Excited, to be honest. Like I said, I really like this part of this podcast, and I've got a good feeling about this. Let's see.
Awesome. I like it when the guests have a good feeling about coming on. Hopefully it works out well for you. I'm going to put 15 seconds on the clock here, Mo. You are going to answer 5 questions in each of the 5 rounds for those 5 games that we've just discussed. If you think that a scenario is going to happen, you're going to shout bank it. If you think a scenario is not going to happen, you're going to shout burn it. Are you ready?
I am.
Okay, the questions are for the listeners if you want to play at home. A is total passes over 800, B is over 4 offside, C is under 30 clearances, D is outside the box goal, and E is a fist pump goal celebration. Most first fixtures, Crystal Palace versus Man City. Let's see how he goes. His time starts now. Total passes over 800.
Bank it.
Over 4 offside.
Burn it.
Under 30 clearances.
Burn it.
Outside a box goal.
Burn it.
Fist pump goal celebration.
Burn it.
Ooh, a plethora of burn it towards the end there. All right, interesting stuff. Mo, I let the clock run out, so obviously we know everything's above board from that perspective. Let's move on to your next fixture. It is Aston Villa versus Brentford, and your time starts now. Total passes over 800.
Bank it.
Over 4 offside.
Bank it.
Under 30 clearances.
Burn it.
Outside the box goal.
Bank it.
Fist pump goal celebration.
Bank it.
Bank it to end it off. Awesome stuff. We're almost halfway. You're nearly there. You're doing well, I think. Obviously, we will see when the games come on. Let's move on to Everton versus Burnley, a game that you predicted 1-1. Let's see how much that factors into your predictions. Your time starts now. Total passes over 800.
Burn it.
Over 4 offsides.
Bank it.
Under 30 clearances.
Burn it.
Outside the box goal.
Burn it.
Fist pump goal celebration.
Burn it.
Just one bank it in that one. All right. Definitely keep an eye.
The way I'm going, I'm seeing a pattern here. I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
Okay, we'll see. Look, everyone has their methods. Everyone has their tactics when it comes to bank it or burn it. We'll see if yours is successful. Let's move on to Fulham versus Newcastle. Your time starts now. Total passes over 800.
Bank it.
Over 4 offsides.
Bank it.
Under 30 clearances.
Burn it.
Outside the box goal.
Bank it.
Fist pump goal celebration.
Burn it.
Burn it to end it off. I mean, the one that would get me, I think, is the outside the box goal, because looking at some of the results in recent weeks, I know, for example, in the Newcastle game, it was a Harvey Barnes goal. But Jake was telling me the other day, obviously free kicks is something to play into outside the box goals. If someone has a free kick just outside the box, which was something I hadn't actually thought of, it's definitely something that could be a factor.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially with Newcastle, they do have a couple of good free kick takers as well. So let's see.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Your last game is Luton versus Bournemouth. Let's kick it off. Your time starts now. Total passes over 800.
Burn it.
Over 4 offsides.
Bank it.
Under 30 clearances.
Burn it.
Outside the box goal.
Burn it.
Fist bump goal celebration.
Burn it.
Burn it to end it off. Just got it off in time before the clock went off. Awesome stuff. No, I think you played a good game there. We will obviously, as I said, see how you do. But interesting, you went with a pattern. You went with a pattern for this one. How did you come up with that, or is that something that sort of happened in the moment?
Like I mentioned, that by the time we were done with the third match, I started seeing the pattern. So obviously, when I was going with it, that wasn't the thought process. I just went with my gut based on the teams that they were playing against and which team was playing at home. Yeah.
Awesome stuff. Thanks for playing, Mo. Let's move on to the rest of the fixtures. We've got Wolves versus West Ham, another one of those 3 o'clock games in the UK. What do you make of this game? Obviously, Wolves, they will be hoping and praying that they can get some sort of players back from an attacking standpoint. I mean, it's been good to see them have debutants, young players from the academy coming through. But really, at this point of the season, you really want to have the likes of Pedro Neto playing out there. Or maybe they don't. Maybe these injuries to the likes of Pedro Neto will stop teams coming in for them. And they get to keep them next season. I don't know. I don't know how that works out, but they certainly need some help from an attacking standpoint. We've seen in games. Aït-Nouri seems to be the focal point of all things attacking from their perspective, and I can see my better half smiling because she has Aït-Nouri in her fantasy team, so he's done well for her. What do you make of Wolves, and how do you think they'll handle a West Ham team that? I guess Moyes it's a weird one. They seem to be doing okay this season, but the fans certainly aren't happy from what I'm gauging. They're not happy with how they're getting about themselves this season, despite being in a decent position in 7th place.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a weird one, like you just mentioned. With Moyes, he has done an outstanding job with West Ham, where he's got them playing in the Europe for 2 years in a row, vying for another European place this season as well. But somehow the fans aren't happy with it. That just doesn't sit right with me. But maybe it's the impact of the kind of football that the top teams are playing. Every team's fans, they want something better. They look for something better in terms of the way that the team plays. However, I still believe that West Ham have had a great season so far, and they are still in a shout for a European place. David Moyes has done an outstanding job, and I think with Wolves, they might be able to get a result because Wolves again is one of those teams that they sit pretty in the middle of the table. They're not really fighting for the European spots anymore. They're definitely out of the relegation troubles. So not much to play for with. And when you add a lot of injuries to that, maybe that they have put their taken their foot off the pedal at the moment. And I think West Ham might be able to get a job here.
That would be very helpful to West Ham's campaign to stay in those European spots. And as you mentioned, to me, it almost feels like a bit of being spoiled. As you said, 2 seasons in a row of European football is fantastic for West Ham. And I know they've got big aspirations to do better and be better. And obviously, you want your team to continually improve. But I do think Moyes has done a decent job. The football's not always necessarily great, but we've seen teams where they're getting results, but the football isn't necessarily what they want. They move to a manager that then plays the football they want, and the results don't necessarily come. So you almost have to pick one or the other sometimes. Obviously, the bigger teams are saying, they get both. They get the football and the results at the moment. But I think it's a dangerous game. If you're replacing Moyes with a new manager who's going to have to come in and probably change that team a lot if you're going to play a more expansive style of football. So there's going to be a lot of turnover. There's going to be a lot of money that needs to be spent. There's going to be time and patience that's going to be needed for that manager to reshape how the club plays football. In all of that, will you still be getting European football? Will you still be high up in the table? I don't know. Maybe they can do it. Maybe they won't. We will see. But big game. I'm looking at Wolves. I'm looking at the injuries up front. I don't know if they're going to get too many of those players back. So I've got to lean towards West Ham here. I think West Ham picked them off, make it quite a physical game and sort of bully them with experience and go and win this game 2-1.
All right. I feel that Wolves, given the performance that we saw from West Ham in the last game, although it has to be said that at one point they had conceded like 4 goals within 30 minutes, given the 3 against Newcastle and the one at the start of the game against Spurs. But after that, the Moisey team that really showed up and they closed that game really well. And I think that factor, that result was a great one for them, and they might be able to get a clean sheet here as well. So I'm going to go with 1-0. And before you move on to the next game, I do want to add to that point that you added, that you mentioned that, it's a very risky game going for a new manager, going for the results as well as the kind of play that their fans want. And that's what makes it really strange for me, because they actually tried it with Pellegrini a couple of years ago or a few years ago, and that did not go well. They ended up reeling at around 13th or 14th position. So it really is a strange one how the fans believe or feel about Moisey and how the team should be playing.
Yeah, it's a dangerous game, though. It's a dangerous game. We will see. We will see how they do and what they do in the off season. But yeah, sorry, your score prediction for that one?
1-0 West Ham.
1-0 to West Ham. Yeah, I can see that. Let's move on to Brighton versus Arsenal. I mean, Brighton, we mentioned that very tactical game against Brentford during the midweek. Arsenal had a very professional performance against Luton. Very aggressive in that first half, pressing them high, causing them problems. And then you sort of just manage the game from there, being 2-0 up. What do you make of this one? Brighton, maybe their style of football will make this game quite interesting. You mentioned Brighton make games interesting earlier in the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. The way they played, the way the Jerbies got them playing, they definitely like to go, head to head with whatever team they're playing. And the game against Liverpool is a very good reminder of that. Although Liverpool did miss a lot of chances, but I think this will be an interesting game. We will see. I'm hoping, actually, rather than I being sure about it, that we might see a few goals in this one. But given the performance that Arsenal are coming from at home, as well as the performance that they gave against City, their defense looks just resolute, very, very resolute. So I'm not sure if Brighton will have too much luck. Might be interesting in the way the game is played, but we might not end up with a lot of goals.
Yes, and I think both or the 3 teams that are going for the title are slowly starting to realize they're going to have to win every game. I don't see how you win this title. I think the person that wins this title will be the team that wins every single game. And maybe, I guess, from a points tally perspective, it's possible for the other teams to go and win every single game and still not get it because of where Liverpool sit on the table. If they go and win all of their games, it's in their hands. But it feels like you're going to need to win all your games just to be in the conversation for this title with the way that these teams are playing. I think Arsenal, will fancy a game against a Brighton side who play good attacking football. Obviously, the patience that Brighton show on the ball. It will be interesting to me, sort of the possession battle, because will Arsenal allow Brighton to have a lot of the ball? We obviously saw them deploy that against Man City. Or will Arsenal try and bully them off the ball? We know they've got that high press. And if that happens, how do Brighton react? Because, being a team that likes to be in possession and sort of move the defensive shape of the other team, sort of lull them into a sleep with the passes and then quicken the pace. It's a very tempo-intensive game that Brighton play. I'm very curious how this game is going to pan out. And then obviously there's that side thing of Arsenal have Champions League football coming up. So does that factor into their performances? Do they have one eye looking ahead to what could be in the Champions League? Obviously, on Tuesday, they play Bayern Munich, same night that Man City play Real Madrid. And we've seen what Bayern Munich have done to Arsenal in recent seasons. We know it's not the same Bayern Munich, so Arsenal will probably fancy their chances and, in my opinion, are favourites going into that game based on how these two teams are playing throughout the season and at the moment. Does that leave the window a bit open for Brighton, where some Arsenal players might have one eye on that game coming up?
That's a valid point, but once again, I feel like personally I've been proven, extremely wrong by Arsenal this season. I'll be the first one to admit. I thought that they did not have the resilience in them to, go toe to toe with City 2 years in a row, but they have actually been very resolute. Even the game against Luton, they did rest quite a few of their players, and that had no impact on the performance that they put on the field. Albeit they were at home. I still do fancy Arsenal to get the job done here, with or without resting players, even if they want to, keep an eye on that clash against Bayern. So I'm gonna go with. I want to go with 2-0 Arsenal because that's how good they've been in the recent weeks. But I'm gonna give Brighton a goal and go with 2-1.
Yeah, and I get where you're coming from with that 2-0 initially, because Arsenal are the stingiest defense in the Premier League at the moment. They set up really well defensively. They've got players playing with confidence and playing well in Gabriel and Saliba, and it sort of pushes on from there. I wonder if the Champions League might have something to it, and that's where I've also given Brighton that goal. I've also gone 2-1 to Arsenal. I do think it's one of those situations where even if Arsenal are ahead, they might save some legs and not necessarily go full out, which I guess we will move on to the next game. Then we both predicted 2-1 for that one. But again, I think an interesting game. But I would assume this is the game of the weekend. Certainly from many people's perspectives, if you're looking at it from an objective standpoint, Man United versus Liverpool. Liverpool may have the bragging rights when it comes to the league table at the moment, and obviously we'll see whether or not they can get back to the top of the table when they play Sheffield United tonight. But Man United have the bragging rights in terms of recent performances. They had that game earlier in the season where they frustrated Liverpool to no end. Then they have the FA Cup game where they go and win, knock Liverpool out. Man United are headed to Wembley in that semi-final. Can they do one more and upset Liverpool's title challenge? And potentially, if Man United win this game, Mo, and Liverpool don't win the league, I'm pretty sure Man United fans are going to say, we're the ones that stopped Liverpool.
Absolutely. A lot of people had Arsenal versus City as the title decider. This could be the title decider for Liverpool if Man United put the right result out. It would be fun to ruin the party for Klopp, but I just don't know what we are going to get with Man United. We came off a very good result against Liverpool in the FA Cup. Once again, Liverpool did have a plethora of chances, but they gave us a way out. They create a lot of chances. That's how they play. But then we come against Brentford, and actually I remember watching the game, and the first 15 minutes, it looked like, maybe a stone might have been turned, and this this side might be able to, start controlling games a little bit. But then they get one chance, a couple of chances, and then the whole game just, rushes past you with United not even getting a control of the ball. So I don't feel very confident about this. I would love to ruin the party, like I said, but I think Liverpool have to be favorites.
Yeah, I think Liverpool will be favourites going into this one, based on league position. But I think for Man United, I think the game plan is, as if I can say, as simple as this. We all know it's more complicated than that. But basically, Man United need to soak up the pressure. As soon as they win the ball, Bruno Fernandes needs to get into space. That first pass has to be to Bruno Fernandes. Then from there, he's looking out wide. You've got Garnacho, you've got Rashford, who've got the pace out wide. Try and get the ball to them. Isolate Liverpool's centre-backs out wide, because we know Liverpool's full-backs are going to be bombing forward. And then try and pick Liverpool off on the counter-attack. That's how I see Man United approaching this game. Whether or not they can keep Liverpool out long enough to deploy that game plan will be interesting to see. I don't think any at Old Trafford are expecting Man United to come into this game and boss the game from a possession standpoint. I think it would be unwise for Man United to try and play a possession-heavy game against such a high-pressing team like Liverpool, especially when they haven't been playing that style of football so often this season. I think Liverpool will be able to press them well enough. So yeah, I think it's quite obvious how Man United approach it. It's just whether or not the amount of possession that they are going to allow Liverpool is going to be too much, and allow Liverpool too many opportunities to go and win this game. From a Liverpool perspective, I don't think a draw is enough. Usually, in a season, you look at games against the traditionally big six teams, and you look at an away game to a traditionally big six team, and you say, look, if we can come away with a draw, that's a good result. We'll go pick up points elsewhere. But such is the nature of the title race at the moment that I don't think Liverpool can afford that. I've mentioned before, I think if Liverpool are to win this title this season, they have to go and win every single game. They have to win out the season. So it starts tonight with Sheffield United and whether or not they can do it there. You don't want to mess up in a game that you clearly must be winning. But then obviously in a Man United game away from home at Old Trafford, they have to put in a performance. And Man United, I'm not concerned with Man United's form at the moment coming into this Liverpool game, because we've seen time and time again where big teams, and I'll use that phrase again, the traditionally big six, where they're having a season where they're maybe not where they expect to be or hope to be, but they can always muster a performance against the bigger team. They can always pull that one performance out because the players are more energized, they're more motivated in these games than in some of the other games, in my opinion. We all know they're professional players and they treat games professionally. But when you're not in a title race like this, if you're a Man United player, I think there's a gear that you're not getting to in some of those other games, both as an individual and as a team, collective, that you can get to and find in big games like this, especially when you know you could potentially stop Liverpool winning a title. We know the implications of that with these two teams being the two most successful teams in English football history. So Man United won't want Liverpool to win the title. So they're going to be motivated. If I'm Eric Ten Hag, I've got Sir Alex Ferguson coming to the training ground, talking to the players and telling them why they have to go and win this game. You know, I'm employing every single tactic. Get Rio Ferdinand, get Roy Keane, whoever you need to get these players motivated to stop Liverpool winning the title. That's what I'm doing this week. That's pretty much where it lies. And then obviously for Man United, they've also got aspirations of European football this season. So even if they are not wanting to do it for stopping Liverpool, they should want to do it for themselves to try and get as high up the table as they can. We've mentioned how Aston Villa are starting to stutter a little bit. Maybe they can catch up to them. We'll see. games are running out. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this game, Mo. I think it's going to be an exciting game. And your namesake, I think, is going to be a big factor. Mo Salah, obviously, for the teams you don't want to have a factor, but he's been so good in big games in recent seasons. And if there's one thing you can say about Mo Salah, is he doesn't shy away from the big games. If you look at the record books, most of the goal scoring tallies for Liverpool in big games, he started to take them over. He started to overtake the likes of Gerrard and Torres and whoever else had those records, Suarez of the world. He now has those records, and we will see whether or not he has an impact. I think he will. We saw last time against Brighton, he had a lot of opportunities, but maybe was still rusty from coming back from that injury. Man United can't afford him to give him those type of chances this time around.
Absolutely. And adding to the point of Mo Salah stepping up in the big games, it seems like he just loves stepping up when it comes to Old Trafford or playing against Manchester United. So that's a scary thought in itself. And I feel like let's not forget that United are playing tonight as well against Chelsea. A win there might help boost some momentum and help them get some belief. However, given the nature of the season, doesn't really impact. We've never gotten into a certain form, so might not have that huge of an impact. But I do feel the derby effect, the thought of stopping Liverpool from winning the title in Klopp's last season. We've already prevented them from pursuing a quadruple. So there are some, added spices to this game. Liverpool look too strong for us at this moment, and personally, I feel you mentioned Bruno Fernandes, and obviously, if we are to get a goal, that's the only route we have through Bruno. Lobbing it over to our forwards. But I do feel Kobe Mainu might be an important player in this game and might have. If we are to get any sort of result in this, whether it's a draw or a win, which seems very unlikely, I think Kobe Mainu will have one of his biggest games because he's actually the sane head in the team, which just baffles me. He's 18 years old, but even with Bruno by his side, he's the one who makes the sane decisions, who makes the right decisions at the right time. So a huge game for him would be needed alongside Bruno and the forwards to get any kind of result in this. But on paper and going into the game, I think Liverpool are clear favourites, and my prediction for the game would be 2-1 Liverpool as well.
Yeah, I'm showing my Liverpool bias here. I think Liverpool will be angry with how they went out in the FA Cup to Man United. I don't think they're going to drop their concentration in a way that they did later on against Man United. I also think Liverpool in that game against Man United, it's obviously one of those things that's not spoken about a lot. They had a lot of injuries in that game, if we remember. So they will be looking at that game and saying, look, yes, Man United beat us recently, but we had a lot of injuries. Some of those players might be back for us. Obviously, Mo Salah will be fitter coming into this game, but maybe the likes of Alisson, etc., can start to make their way in. If Alisson's fit, I think it's a game changer for Liverpool. But if he's not, obviously Kelleher, he's done very well as any debutant can do to their number one goalkeeper. But I think the thing for me, Mo, and why I'm going with a 3-1 Liverpool win, and as I said, maybe it's my bias kicking in, but I'm assuming that tonight's games, Liverpool are going to put in a similar performance to Arsenal did against Luton, where it's a professional performance. They see that game out, maybe go 2-0 up by half time. They can maybe wrap some of their players in cotton wool for the weekend. Whereas Man United versus Chelsea, if that goes long into that game, and Man United have to keep some of their players on the pitch longer than maybe they would want to because the game is still competitive. And I think the physical exertions that Man United will have to give in that game against Chelsea maybe not just from a physical standpoint, but from a mental standpoint, because that's another big game. Mentally, that's going to be an exhausting game. Can they turn it around quick enough and get those players firing for the Liverpool game? I think that might be telling for Man United, especially with the injuries they have in defence. Their defence is going to have to play two big mental games in a row, and that is why I'm giving Liverpool that edge of 3-1.
Makes absolute sense, like you mentioned, the factors that you mentioned. I was actually, inclined towards a 3-1 scoreline. Maybe my bias kicked in, but unfortunately, even with my bias kicked in, we did not get a win or a result. So that's the state we are in. But Liverpool are obviously the clear favorites.
But look, anything can happen in derbies, which Man United fans will, I'm sure, hold on to, and hopefully for their sake and your sake, they put in a great performance, and then sort of you let the chips lie. As long in big games, for me, my biggest issue is just don't put in a bad performance. Put in a good performance, and then look, if we lose, obviously it hurts, but at least I can be proud of a performance. Hopefully, Man United do that for your sake. Hopefully, Liverpool do that for my sake. Let's move on to the two teams. They do play tonight. Sheffield United versus Chelsea will then play each other on the weekend. Chelsea having a weird season, disappointing season. Poch has come out saying they're still missing something, which is incredible considering how much they've spent over the last couple of years. But obviously, I get what he's saying. I think it's more to do with how they've spent the money that they've spent, not necessarily how much they've spent. And then obviously Sheffield United, one of those two teams, I'm assuming you mentioned they're two teams that you think are pretty close to nailed to go down. I'm assuming Sheffield is one of those teams for you. They sit with 15 points in the Premier League at the moment. They've like Burnley, they've made some efforts. They're going down swinging. Both in the Bournemouth game and in the Fulham game recently, they've been ahead and obviously been clawed back in those games. But they're putting up an effort and a fight. And we saw Burnley struggle against the team. I mean, we saw Chelsea struggle against Burnley, a team that had 10 men that is also fighting for their survival. So maybe this could be a tricky one for Chelsea.
Yeah, I think this is going to be an interesting game. Like you said, like Sheffield are one of those teams that I do feel might be going down, but just like Burnley, they have been putting up a fight in the recent weeks. And given how vulnerable Chelsea are, to an extent like Manchester United, especially the most recent result that you can look at as the draw against Burnley. So I feel like Sheffield might be able to get something out of this game, given the state that Chelsea are in, given the kind of weird season that they're having, and given the extra benefit or the extra motivation Sheffield have to keep fighting to stay in the Premier League.
Yeah, it will be a tall order. What score prediction have you got for this one?
I'm gonna go with a 1-1 draw for this one for Sheffield.
1-1 draw.
Which doesn't seem likely because of the fact that Sheffield are one that a team that is definitely going to go for a win. But I don't think Chelsea are clinical enough, or Chelsea are strong enough mentally, being able to control games. I think it might be a scrappy one with a 1-1 result at the end.
I think Sheffield United give Chelsea that scare with that goal. But I think Chelsea's just about to see it over the line. And I'm basically leaning on Cole Palmer in this one. I think he's been sensational this season. And I think he probably helps them get over the line with a 2-1 win there. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be easy for Chelsea. They've seemed to struggle this season way too often. Let's move on to Tottenham versus Nottingham Forest. Obviously, our last game for this game week. Probably disappointing result for Tottenham in the midweek. Obviously, had that midweek game against West Ham, the London derby. They go ahead. You think they're going to run away with it, but get clawed back with that Zuma header goal. And sort of they huffed and they puffed. They really couldn't do anything other than that against West Ham. Nottingham Forest, not great defensively. Gave us a spark in that Fulham 3-1 win. Can they give that same performance 2 games in a row, or is that asking too much for them?
I think they definitely have the potential. They definitely have the players in the team, and the most recent result might be helpful for them as well. But they're playing against Tottenham's side that is looking. I actually tweeted that the other day, I think, as well, that they actually make sense on the pitch. The football they play, that it actually makes sense, and it's not good. I don't like it. But given that Van de Ven is back as well, and he clearly showed why he is so important for them as well. I think Tottenham will be able to control most of the game. But I'm gonna go with a surprise result here, and I'm gonna go with 2-1 Nottingham Forest win, and put my rationale to the side for this one, and go into the history and say maybe Spurs are gonna do a Spurs.
Look, yeah, from my perspective, I think we've seen from Spurs that they're not afraid to just give an attacking onslaught. They'll just bring on all the attacking players and try and just bash you down with the volume of players that they have up front and high up the pitch. And especially with Mickey van der Ven back, that helps them to do that because he can sweep up at the back anything that goes long. I'm not sure Nottingham Forest have been consistent enough this season to put back-to-back performances in, which is why I'm leaning Tottenham in this one. I'm expecting an exciting game. But I just think Tottenham's attack versus Nottingham Forest's defense doesn't give me much confidence for Nottingham Forest, and I just think they're going to face an onslaught. I've gone 3-1 to Tottenham here, and they continue their charge for Champions League football. But Mo, that is going to do it for us on this episode of A Tad Predictable. Do you have anything you want to plug, put over, or promote before we wrap up?
No. Like I said, the last time I was here as well, I do not have much to plug. But, if you use Twitter, do follow me at banterfc.com. Banterfc, I don't know why I said .com, to see me praise the menu and, cry about how we play a different game every week.
All right. Well, hopefully for your sake tonight and the weekend goes well, but I won't be crossing my fingers for you. I can be honest about that. Guys, from my end, check out all of the content on EPL Index website. There are match previews, post-match reviews, player performances, all of the news that you guys could wish for, including obviously how the games shape up tonight. In case you miss them or you can't watch them, just go pop in at EPL Index. Go and follow EPL Index on Twitter. Go and follow EPL Index on your podcast provider. Subscribe to us. Give us 5 stars. Write positive comments. That stuff really does help us out. Obviously, there's the Two-Footed podcast with Dave Hendrick that runs weekly, Monday to Friday, where he discusses the hottest topics in football, also on the EPL Index channel. Also, go check out the flagship show that runs at the end of the game weeks. It's EPL Roundtable, where Kevin DeVries does the reviewing of the EPL game week. Obviously, we do the previewing on this podcast. I've been Tadio Chinakura. You can find me on the Twitter handle at Tad Predicts. This podcast you can find at A Tad Predictable. Huge thank you to Obi Semenya. He's at John Empire SA. And Jody, she's at Spursy141 for our guest intros. Our producer behind the glass, Mr. Guy Drinkle. He's on Twitter at Guy Drinkle. And he's been Mo, as he said, at Banter FC. That's BANTERRFC on Twitter. And remember, Chisingaperi, Chinoshura.
And still, Salah. Oh, sensational! Son had a goal and scored a beauty.
Oh, what a strike from Yuri Tielemans.
De Bruyne. And it is Wood. Martinelli, gorgeous. Still going up. Oh, he's done it again.
And City have won the Premier League.
Sports Social Podcast Network.